I'm standing in front of a painting of Mary Reardon. It was commissioned in 1903. About the same time, a dam was built, creating Flagstaff's first reservoir, which was named Lake Mary, after Tim and Caroline's daughter. The lake has seen a lot of changes in the past 100 years, and they are brought to light by one NAU student who did his graduate studies on Lake Mary. Lake Mary is the city of Flagstaff's only surface reservoir for drinking water, and the lake is at just 13% capacity. Graduate student Cory Miller says the overgrowth of pine trees is partially to blame. He says they're responsible for a process called evapotranspiration.
The trees intercept the moisture, and then they evaporate it, and they transpire the moisture back up into the air, and basically all of that water is lost back to the atmosphere, and none of it falls to the ground, where it can either infiltrate into the ground and recharge our aquifers below ground, or it can also pond and run off the surface of the water, which is how we get water into Upper Lake Mary.
Snow is the lake's primary water source, but Miller says it's more than just drought conditions keeping the lake levels low, because data comparisons from earlier years with similar precipitation show a significant decrease in water flows.
But basically it's about 15 to 25% or so. We have 15 to 25% less surface flows into the lake now, and it may be that that is due to the increase in overstory vegetation. There's other factors that could be accounted for that we haven't measured. There could be increases in evaporation at the same time, which would also account for less water into the lake, but we really don't think that that's the case. We believe that it's the trees.
Miller uses tools including a densiometer and a prism to measure tree density and canopy cover. He used his extensive graduate research to create management plans for the forest. He says along with low lake levels, the dense canyons around the reservoir create another dilemma.
If a wildfire were to come through those areas, it would create a lot of blackened soot. It creates water repellent layers on the soil. Volatile organic chemicals in the plants burn and create noxious chemicals on the face of the soil, and those are carried into the lake. And in addition, another concern is that the fire retardant chemicals that would be used to fight the fires would also end up in the lake. And the final major concern is that heavy metals can be leached out of the soils and out of the surrounding geology, the rocks and that sort of thing, and those can also end up in the lake, and those can greatly affect the water quality.
For Cory Miller's Master of Forestry, he gathered data from the Lake Mary watershed to use in a professional paper. That information will be shared with forest professionals.
We have a fairly substantial organization, what we call the ecological group, and that has most of our research people in it. So they'll publish the research, we'll take the research from there and kind of massage it in a way that is a little bit more understandable to the more practitioners in the field, and then we'll work with those practitioners on the information that research, the conclusions of that research.
Miller's work will also provide the City of Flagstaff and agencies like the Forest Service with updated information on tree density and the health of the forest around Lake Mary. That research is required under the National Environmental Policy Act for planning and decision-making.
One of the things that we found out about, especially over the last 10 to 15 years as the Forest Service budgets have shrunk and the number of personnel they have, they just don't have the people to get out in the woods maybe like they used to get a lot of this information. So Cory's actual assessment's the first time anybody's been out there since I think the 1930s. When you talk about environmental analysis, and you'll hear the National Environmental Policy Act and that, you have to have information that's relatively fresh. It's not 70 years old.
The Lake Mary area has changed a lot in the past century or so, and seen a reversal from about 80% open space and 20% trees to just 20% openings and 80% tree cover. The increasing fire danger and the decreasing lake levels could prompt decision makers to pursue thinning in the forest around the Lake Mary watershed.